Hey there, and welcome back to the Parable Podcast. I'm Danielle Zapchenk. Today, you are going to meet Dominique Bradberry, a leading homemaking educator who shares about how we can dream big and connect with God at the same time.
You know, I thought that preaching the gospel was like the thing that made me come alive. But when I really began to think about it, it was the most strangest thing that came out of me. I said, I want to be a great mom and a great wife. To me, that was my epitome of what ministry looks like.
Here's my conversation with Dominique Bradberry. Well, Dominique Bradberry, thank you so much for being a part of the Parable Podcast today. I just believe you have so much joy and life and humor that you bring into your work on Instagram. That's how I found you. I was just blown away. I think you are amazing, and that's why I'm like, I hope this girl will come talk to me.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here. I was talking with my daughter last night about cleaning, and she's just like, she watches a lot of cleaning YouTube videos.
Interesting.
I know. I'm like, but you also don't clean your room, so I'm confused how that connects. But I was curious. As a kid, I like rearranged my room like every week. Is that something that you did?
Oh my goodness. Same. We could have been best friends, literally.
So how did like home management and that idea of cleaning, like how did that get into your space?
Very similar to you. When I was a little girl, I would arrange my room literally once a week. Like it was like a ritual. Like every Saturday, I had like 2 different comforter sets that I would kind of like swap through. And I was really big on it. Now, mind you, I didn't come from a home where cleanliness was like something that was like major. We just kind of got by, you know, like my mom and dad, they worked a regular 9-to-5 job. And usually on Saturdays, I had memories of my mom blasting gospel music and the house smelling like pine sol. That was how we did things. And during the week, it was kind of like every man for themselves, you know? So I didn't necessarily see the example of like, okay, every day we focus on a certain area. It definitely wasn't like that. But it was more so just, I guess, something that God gave me. I was very interested in making sure that my space was a certain way. So that's kind of how I started as a young girl. And then when I was probably in about probably like 6th or 7th grade, I had 2 best friends, Kari and Louise, if you're listening. Hey, girls. They were my best friends when I was in middle school. And I remember particularly one of their moms, she was a stay-at-home mom. And we would always go over there and we would hang out and we would play. And I just remember how like well kept their home always was. Like it was just like so inspiring. It was just like a breath of fresh air. Like her mom would just like welcome us in. I remember there were like many nights where I would be there until like 6 o'clock at night. And then she would be like, hey, Dom, like, do you want to take a plate home with you? And I'm like, oh my goodness, yes. You know, and she would send me on my way home with like a plate of food, and just like her hospitality and just the way that she hosted us like so well. And just the way that she cared for her family and her home just spoke volumes to me. And I didn't realize until I was like way older how much of an impact that had on my life. But I can definitely say that the seed was definitely sown like during that time.
I love that. And really, when you think about it, you were saying the word hospitality. So just like that welcoming nature, that's what it wasn't about. I doubt that you were like inspecting the dust. You know, obviously it was well kept, but it's that feeling of like making a safe place for people. And that means something. So that's beautiful. Way to go. Was it Carrie or Louise's mom?
This was Louise's mom. Yes.
All right. Great.
Louise's mom. Miss Debbie, you was killing it, girl.
Way to go, Miss Debbie. So, I mean, I think back to in 7th grade, we got to do home ec. And I feel all I learned was how to make an egg in a hole, which I don't know who actually...
I remember those. With the bread?
Yes.
With the bread, with the egg?
You cut the hole in there with a cup and you put the egg in.
I remember that. No one's making that.
No one is making that. No one is making that. Besides that, I mean, I think maybe we did laundry. I don't even know. But what process like helped you better understand and start routines that reward? Like, what did you need out of that? That obviously it wasn't just like birthed overnight. Like it was a process. So what started that for you?
Yeah. So what started that for me was once I had my firstborn. So when I had Judah, at this time I was newly married and I was a new mom. and a new wife at the same time. So as you can imagine, it was crazy town. And I guess you can say this is the first time in my life where I had other people kind of like dependent on me. Like I lived by myself before I got married. I had my own like little studio apartment, and I didn't really focus on routines. Now, mind you, there were like things that I would do like, okay, you know, when I noticed that I'm on my last pair of underwear, I'm going to do laundry, you know, or like, oh, I don't have anything to eat. Let me go to the grocery store. You know, I was nowhere near where I am right now is with systems. But when I had Judah, I just remembered instant overwhelm because I had just had a C-section. So as you can probably imagine, I was like bedridden for a few weeks and trying to manage a newborn. I just did not know how to manage it all. You know, our home was just kind of like being neglected. We were eating out all the time during this phase. And I just remembered that I got so tired of like ending the night, just like so frustrated. Like you ever just like go to bed like, oh my goodness, I know it's the end of the day, but I still have like a million and one things to do. And then you even wake up with just like still thinking about those things. Like I remember just like waking up and just still feeling like overwhelmed before the day even started. Like during that time, I remember just feeling that frustration, if you will. And I remember that I was like, you know what? I need to just have something where I can just kind of like plan out my day. Something that I can just kind of like sit down and write out, you know, what I'm going to be doing or like what meals are we going to be having. During this time also, my relationship with the Lord was like really suffering. I felt like I just did not have the time that I wanted to be able to read my word and to pray. I mean, my whole mindset around devotion has shifted so much as a mom. But during this time, you know, I was used to my singleness where I can spend hours reading my Bible and praying and no one needs me. I can just be right here, you know. But when you have a family, the time changes quite a bit and you have to be creative, you know, with how you're spending time with the Lord. So I was just like frustrated by that and feeling like I didn't have the time that I wanted to spend time with the Lord. So I remember I developed like this planner, if you will. I grew up in the age of like MySpace. So I taught myself how to code when I was like 13 years old. And I taught myself like Photoshop and all those different things. So me now being a new mom, I was like, you know what? I'm going to create like a little digital planner, if you will, on Photoshop. I did that and I created a little planner and I printed it out. And this was like my planner that I would use every day. And instantly, Danielle, when I started using this, it was just like a change. I felt in control is the word that I will use. I felt like even though there was so much things going around me, I was able to look at this paper and know, just focus on what's here. I don't have to worry about everything else. So when I did that, I was in a group meet, like a little group meet group with like a bunch of moms from my church. And I was like, hey, you guys, I created this planner thing. Do you want it? Like it's been helping me. Do you want it? And they're just like, yeah. So I ended up sending that to them. And before you know it, several other people started asking me for this. Before you know it, I created a blog, got it on there where people can download it. And the rest is kind of history.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I mean, and it's good to know like this wasn't overnight. Like I think that helps us as women when we see somebody doing something, we're like, oh wow, like this was created and birthed over, you said like the last 6 years. So
oh, for sure. Yeah. And I also didn't start with, okay, now we need the laundry routine. Now we need the meal planning. Now we need this. No, I started with the bare minimum. Let me just find some type of control in my day. And then it all kind of began to spiral into like, okay, now let me focus on laundry. Now let me focus on, you know, all the other various areas.
Dominique, I think that's one thing that I appreciate about your work and also like how you share on Instagram is the idea of having grace with yourself, because there's so many things of when you become a new mom, when you have just a new place, you're a single person, or maybe you've gone into the zone of an empty nester, everything changes and you're like, why isn't this connecting? Why can't I do this? And I'm like, well, things have changed. So speak to that idea of just like having grace with yourself.
Oh, yes. So I think that I want to call myself a perfectionist, but I can definitely be hard on myself sometimes when I fall short according to my standards. And I think that another part of my motherhood journey was my son, Judah. He had some sensory sensitivities from the time that he was 2 years old. He would not eat or do anything until literally 2 years old. He took his first bite. During that season of where we were doing the occupational therapy and all these various therapies to encourage him to eat, I remember that was definitely the lowest was part of my life and then also just like my home as well. And I think that in that season, the Lord really spoke to me about having grace for myself because I was still trying to show up, the same way that I was used to. But the Lord just began to show me like, hey, you're in a different season. When I look at you with the eyes of mercy. You are being so hard on yourself and he's not even doing that. And one thing about God is that he is so for like the dialogue and for the relationship. And it's not about checking things off of your to-do list, but it's about life being a journey. Your relationship with God is literally a relationship. It's going to grow. You're going to go through lows. You're going to go through highs. Like it's all a part of the journey. And I think that when I learned that lesson, that's when I learned to just have grace on myself. Like, hey, I'm okay. Everything is okay. It's not the end of the world. One of the things that I like to kind of rehearse with myself, is this going to matter 6 months from now? No? Okay. I can take a breather. Like, don't even think about it, And that has like really helped me so much.
That's so good. You talked about your journey and, the show is about understanding our journey, our relationship with God. It changes over time. And I loved what you said about how he looks at us with the eyes of mercy. Oh, that feels so good. Yes. So Dominique, what would be a story that you want to share with us today where you have learned a lesson of some kind that God has shown you over your period of your life?
So I'm actually based in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm actually not originally from here. I am a born and raised Jersey girl. So I'm an East Coaster all the way. And it's so funny that the story that I want to share is just really a story of how God can really take what you think you're going to be doing and flip it on its head. So when I was probably about, I want to say 22, 21, something like that, I heard of a ministers in training program here in Columbus, Ohio. So during this time, I was really growing in my relationship with the Lord. And I was just like, I want to start preaching the gospel. Like that was my idea of like next level in God, like, okay, I'm getting good. My relationship with God, I'm reading my Bible, I'm praying and all these different things. And now I want to just start preaching. And I didn't have any thought process for like, okay, how can I go about doing this? It was more so like I knew of someone who was having like a ministers in training program. So I was like, okay, let me go get my minister's license. So I heard about this program in Columbus, Ohio at a church, and I decided to move to Columbus. Now, mind you, the program was only supposed to be for 6 months. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go there and then I'm going to basically come back to New Jersey and kind of continue what I was doing. Get to Columbus and I go through the ministers in training program, which was awesome. And I remember we had a final lesson at the end of our class. And the lesson was to basically dream with God and to really kind of ask yourself, how do you plan to preach the gospel in your life, essentially? Like, what does that look like for you? And our leader encouraged us to ask God about it. So during this time, we had also watched a documentary. And in this documentary, it was just like people in all walks of life using what God has given them to minister to those around them. So you had some people who were feeding children on the street, or maybe like coaching a soccer team, or even just working a regular 9-to-5. What was amazing about this was that there was a quote, and the quote was a Howard Thurman quote that says, "Don't ask the world what the world needs, but instead do what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And essentially this quote is saying, don't try to look to like fill a need, but rather do what makes you come alive. And in that you will find your true ministry. And I was just like, okay, I like that. But I think, I thought that preaching the gospel was like the thing that made me come alive. But when I really began to think about it, it was the most strangest thing that came out of me. I said, I want to be a great mom and a great wife. To me, that was my epitome of what ministry looks like. And I remember I was asked to share during the night of our ordination, and I shared that, and it was just like amazing. Now, at this time, of course, I wasn't married, and I also didn't have any children. So I'm like, okay, Lord, like, what is this? But long story short, I just remember that in that moment, though, it just felt it felt so right. Like that, it was almost like this was what I was meant to do. So long story short, a year has passed since that night, and I ended up meeting my husband, and we get married, and I start having children. Once again, the idea of being a godly wife and mother still wasn't really like unfolding. The storyline was definitely being written. It's just that I could not see it during that time. So I become a wife and a mom, and I'm doing all these different things. And then after I had Judah and I created that planner and I started working more on routines and rewards, then it all literally just started to come together. Like it was all very natural. It wasn't forced at all. This is literally me being me. I would do this if no one paid me a penny, which I have. I do this for my friends all the time. But it's now, not only am I generating income for my family, but also I am teaching women how to use their home as a place of ministry. Because you don't need to be on a platform with a microphone to be able to preach the gospel. But we do it in our homes as we are cooking meals, as we are tidying, as we are inviting others, and hosting others in our home. That is ministry to me, like all day, all day.
I totally believe that too, Dominique, because I think that sometimes we get caught up. You have this idea of only pastors, only people in leadership are able to like spread the word of God. But I mean, I've said this in other shows too, is that, I'm not going to go to the end of my life and you be like, who really impacted my life the most? It was Brad Pitt. It was him. Like nobody's going to say that. It's like those people who are in your life, your mom, your dad, the people that mean the most to you, those little moments are what impact and make a difference in the kingdom. And I hope and I pray that people hear what you're saying is that matters. Like that matters so much to Jesus.
It does. There's a quote by, I think her name is Janie Ortlund, and it says, "I believe that a godly home is a foretaste of heaven. Our homes, imperfect as they are, must be a haven from the chaos outside." And then she says, "They should be a reflection of our eternal home, where troubled souls find peace, weary hearts find rest, hungry bodies find refreshment, lonely pilgrims find communion, and wounded spirits find compassion." And that right there is like, yes! That's really what it's about with, ministering in the place of the home and like all the various ways that we can literally show people what the kingdom of God is like.
Yeah. And it's different for everybody. Just because you don't have the gift of hospitality doesn't mean that you can never have people in your house, or you bring other people that have that gift and you just have that place. So when you were talking about in your story, you said you had the project or like the final thing of dreaming with God. What did that look like for you?
So when we were given that assignment, I remember, I kind of had that playing in my head, like, wow, so ministry doesn't actually need to look like me having a microphone. And during that time, I really just kind of began to think about the various gifts that God has given me. I would say that for sure, I have a natural bent towards administration. I am like, you tell me that you want to get something done and I will break it down into a to-do list. That's just kind of how the way that my brain functions. So I was thinking about all my gifts in that way. But then I also kind of started to think about, well, like what makes me happy, honestly, like what brings me joy? And it's funny because I could have even said things like fashion. So I'm like really into fashion as well. I used to actually be a fashion blogger way back when. So I could have said fashion, but I really don't know how I came across the idea of being a wife and a mom. I just think that felt like home. It was the most interesting thing. It really was. But I did just begin to think about like the various gifts that I had. And I knew that not only did I want to be a mom and a wife, but also I did want to still use my creative inkling in some capacity to be able to preach the gospel, essentially.
You talked about Judah having some sensory issues, even just being a new wife, a new mom, and just feeling overwhelmed. You said you felt like your relationship with the Lord was suffering, which like who has not had, okay, it's not a surprise. How did you, for one, recognize that? And then how did you like figure out, okay, what does time with God look like for Dominique?
What's interesting is that, so during this time, I also had the mindset like, and I believe that there's a place for this. Let me say this on the onset, that I believe that there is a place for where you have a quiet time, you sit down, you open your word, you read it, and you speak it back to God. I wholeheartedly believe that. But then I also do believe that there is something so special about when you are folding your laundry and the Lord is like, hey, Danielle, I want to talk about that thing, that conversation that you had with your husband yesterday. Boop. And then he's inviting you into conversation. And to me, that is what a thriving relationship looks like. It doesn't always look like, hey, honey, let's sit at the table. Because I imagine with my husband, hey, honey, let's sit at the table. Let's look into each other's eyes. And, it looks like that. But then sometimes it looks like us he's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing, and we're connecting, But during that time, I still had the mindset of like, I need to be sitting down. I need to be, in my word for at least an hour, But this is where I was because I was used to that when I was still single. And I remember just like being so frustrated because I kept falling short. I was still nursing through the night during this time. And I just remember just like crying out to the Lord. What shifted things for me was as I was nursing my son at night, instead of me scrolling on my phone, I just began to talk to the Lord, just to whisper little prayers. And I did that. And before you know it, I'm dialoguing now all the time, just like throughout the day. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm being restored in my spirit, because for me, I'm like an all or nothing girl. And during that time, it was like, well, if I did not on my schedule, I'm supposed to be up at 6:00 in the morning praying. And if I did not make that, then I'm going to just like not do anything all day and wait till tomorrow. But it's like, no. You don't got to do that. So what? Oh, you missed the time during the morning. Okay. Remember, working on a grace-paced life. I'm going to talk to the Lord as I am nursing my baby. I'm going to whisper a prayer as I'm changing his diaper. I'm going to whisper a prayer as I'm cooking. Oh, Lord, I thank you for, providing food for us. Or, the Lord dropped Danielle on my heart. Lord, I just pray Danielle is having a wonderful, and it's the constant dialogue. That is what a thriving relationship with God looks like. And I'm so thankful for that season because it taught me what it looks like to have a thriving relationship with God. I mean, Danielle, there's been moments where I would literally be washing my dishes and I'm listening to a sermon and, the Holy Spirit just touches my heart. Next thing you know, I'm on my floor just crying out to God, like, and I love those moments. I love when he just comes and he visits me and it's just like, thank you for that kiss. I needed that, Lord. Like, yeah, he's so good. I'm like, yes, Lord.
Oh, let me tell you, I have cried on the kitchen floor many a time. So I like to cry in general, but yes, I feel that. And it resonates with me because I think back to when I was in college, I went to a Christian school. So, and again, I don't think anyone like said any of these things to me, but I've just like created like what I believe a godly woman like needs to do every day. And so I had this college roommate, Claire. She's beautiful. She's lovely, but she would wake up at 4 a.m. and do like an hour long. She had note cards. They were color coded. And so I was, instead of being like, wow, what commitment, I was like, okay, well, this is what I need to do. And that's just not my personality. And even when I tried, I'd fall back asleep and then you just get frustrated.
Yes. You get so frustrated. And then you're like, I was going to throw the whole house away. Like, that's how.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm now 39 years old, still trying to figure out, okay, this is how this time with God works best for me. And I appreciate that you're saying, like, there's so many different ways. And for you, it's just like having that dialogue constantly going. And that's so easy. Like, it's just so easy to do once it starts.
It is. And it's so beautiful. And it's so interesting because I feel closer to God now than I did even when I was single and spending the hours, because it's like I didn't just keep God in that confined space, but now it's like we're walking, we're talking every single minute. Like, it's so good.
Dominique, what would you say, like, the top 5 things you would encourage people just to like do daily, like to help with either like their spiritual life or to just help feel like connected to their house?
So I would say that, I mean, I love that we kind of went on about the continual dialogue with the Lord. That is what gives me the fuel to keep going. So I will start right there, is to just really, not only have your time of like separate devotion, but really just like communing with the Lord all day, every day. As far as like what home management is concerned, I really believe that if you can just take 5 minutes to just like plan out your day the night before or even the morning, you will feel 100 times better in your day, period. Whenever I'm sharing with with women or even my students, if they feel like their house or their life is in complete chaos, because oftentimes if you have a chaotic home, your life is probably feeling slightly the same way. So I really encourage them, just take 5 minutes and just write down on a piece of paper. You can either brain dump everything that's in your brain, or you can just write down like 3 simple tasks that you want to get done today. That will oftentimes give you the fuel to just like keep going. Something else that I really, so I'm really big on time management, because I believe that God calls us to be good stewards of our time. And I would definitely say that if you don't already, consider having some type of schedule that you like to follow. Now, mind you, I'm not saying like, okay, 9:01, I'm here. 9:02, I'm here. Like, because some people will take it that way. Totally not. I'm more so, thinking about like, okay, I know that every morning, like for us, we homeschool. So I'm like, every morning we start homeschool at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Whatever happens before then, everything is okay. But we know that we need to be at this table at 10 o'clock in the morning. Or I have like anchors in my day. So 10 o'clock a.m. is an anchor for me. I like to start dinner at about 4 o'clock, another anchor for me, because I know that if I don't, we're going to be eating dinner really late. Another anchor for me is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's usually when I work. So I would really encourage you to just have some type of like schedule, so that way you can see on paper what your life is looking like, and to really evaluate if you are spending too much time in a certain area or not enough time in a certain area. And one thing that I teach is that to kind of revisit it like once every 3 months, because, life works in seasons, and your life will definitely not look the same that it does now 3 months from now. So that's something else. Also, I really am big on getting everyone in the home involved. I am not one of those people that are like, I'm going to clean my house by myself. That's totally not me. I'm like, the more hands we have on board, the better. So if you have 10 kids, look at how many hands you got to help. Okay. But I teach really heavy on, just because you are the manager of your home does not mean that you do everything by yourself. I am a big proponent of delegating, even as early as the age of 2. My son is 2 years old, and he does not have quote unquote chores, but I do encourage him to clean up his messes. The other day, he had a bag of chips. He decides to dump the entire bag of chips on the floor. And I'm like, okay, what are you going to do about it? And then he's like pointing to the closet to get the vacuum. So I'm like, okay, great. I get the vacuum for him. And mind you, of course, he doesn't do a perfect job at 2 years old, but it's still instilling the principle of, if I make a mess, I need to clean it up, and no one's going to clean it up for me. Different things like that. Really getting your family on board to help out is super important. I really believe in that. And the last one I would say is make time to rest. I don't think we rest enough in our culture, and I am big on rest. I schedule rest into my schedule because it's that important to me. Kind of going back to that grace-paced life, sometimes if I don't feel like doing the dishes, I don't do it. Once again, I'm not about perfectionism. I am all about having grace. And if you just continue to go, you're going to notice that your homemaking muscle will get stronger over time. It's kind of how I like to say. You're not going to be perfect day one, but it will get better as you just continue to manage your home intentionally. And yeah, so those are kind of like my 5 top things.
So good. I love the one, because I think what happens with me is like, again, nobody's saying this, but I'm like, oh, I have to clean the house. I have to do the laundry. And I'm just like, wait, I did have chores as a kid too. Like, let's encourage our children. And also just like telling your husband, I think it's more just about like sharing, like, I need help, or can you do this? Because it's a partnership, it's a family. We're not just by ourselves. So, and if you're single and you don't want to do it yourself, you call somebody, have them clean for you. All right.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about seasons too, Danielle. Like, I've had seasons where I've had people help me in different I've had laundry people, I've had I've had cleaning. Usually like in a season where I'm like really busy or I have a baby. Being a manager of your home doesn't mean that you do everything on your own. It just means that you are literally managing. I like to use the term like chief operating officer. I'm managing. I may step in or I may not, but I got this under control.
Yeah. And I think, and you might have mentioned this in one of your posts, it's just like, I think of it as like muscle building. Like it takes time. And again, anytime you learn something new, it's repeated action over and over, and you just figure it out. And I think I'm going to take what I take away most from this is that grace-paced life. I think that's so important because we hold ourselves to the standard that sometimes nobody's holding us to. And we just need to be reminded of that. So Dominique, thank you so much for sharing all your tips, and also also your just heart and dreaming big. If people wanted to get connected to you, how can they do that?
You all can find me on Instagram, where I am acting a fool at Instagram.com/routines that reward. Please send me a message. I would love to speak to you all. Let me know what you think about the episode. And then you can also go to routinesthatreward.com, and then you can find more information about different home management courses that we have. And also that planner that I mentioned is there as well.
Great. Well, good. All of that stuff will be in the show notes. And Dominique, thank you so much for literally, you are a joy to talk to. I'm just grateful that I got to know you a little bit today.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Danielle. And I hope you all enjoyed the episode.
It's always so fun to hear about how someone's passion began. I'm grateful for Dominique and the joy that she's bringing to other people's lives and their homes. If you want to be able to reflect some more about what we discussed today, here's some takeaway questions to think about or journal about this week. Number 1, I just encourage you to dream with God. Set aside some time this week to really use that muscle of dreaming big. Number 2, how can you shift your day-to-day to having a grace-based life for yourself, for your work, your family, whatever it is? Build that idea of grace into your life. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can join the Parable Podcast email list. You're going to get to hear some great stories from me. At least I think they're great. But this is just my way of sharing some funny and messy real-life lessons that I'm learning right now. Just think of it as a little encouragement in your inbox once a month. And another way you can support the show is just by subscribing or telling a friend that you're listening to the Parable Podcast, and it's going to just start conversation. If you have any questions or you want more information about today's episode, all of the show notes are at daniellezapchenk.com. That's ZAPCHENK. That's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Remember, your Parable showcases the dreams that God has in store for you. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.